Before we start the video, I just wanted to say that gambling addiction is a very real disorder that can probably ruin people's lives. I do not take this subject lightly, nor should you. But if you do have a family member or friend who is struggling with gambling addiction, I urge you to please get them some assistance. There will be contact information and references in the description down below for anyone that is in need of help. With that said, I wanted to share a story from my past that might be very beneficial for anyone out there who is struggling with some form of gambling addiction. Now, this isn't the most comfortable of subjects to talk about because whenever you hear about someone having a gambling addiction, we tend to immediately judge that person, and we have this preconceived notion that they're irresponsible, bad with money, and that they're probably ruining their future. However, there is a huge difference between someone that is gambling for the dopamine rush and someone who is gambling with a mathematical edge. This is why you will hear about people being professional poker players, blackjack card counters, or even winning sports bettors. These are all games where you can gain a statistical advantage in the long run and actually win a decent amount of money. And while this may be true for some games, these examples are, I think, in the vast minority of the gambling world. If you're going to go to a casino to gamble, you need to realize that you are essentially paying money for a form of entertainment, and that's it. Now, this is where things usually go wrong for people, and we get addicted to the jolt of dopamine that gambling provides. In the back of our minds, we develop this false hope that if we just hit that card or if we get one more number, then we'll strike it rich and hit the jackpot. But if you can't get these thoughts under control, then entertainment can become a slippery slope straight into addiction. And this was something I came face to face with during my career as a poker player. For the majority of my 20s, playing poker was my only source of income. I didn't have a regular day job, and I was playing anywhere from 40 to 50 hours per week. I would be traveling to casinos, playing online, and even one year I entered in the 2008 World Series of Poker main event, which I didn't cash in, and I was eliminated on day 2. But what happened to me was, instead of staying in my lane and focusing on improving my skills as a poker player, I began to get sucked into the allure of the gambling world. I started to play various games that were outside of my skill set, and I started to develop this irrational confidence that if I'm a winning poker player, then I can be a winning blackjack player as well. Or maybe I can be a winning roulette player, which obviously doesn't make any sense, especially for games like roulette, where it's mathematically impossible to win any money at all over an extended period of time. And of course I knew this, but for whatever reason, this addiction that I had to gambling began to grow and grow as time went on. I just couldn't enjoy the basketball game anymore. I had to bet on the halftime score or bet on the over-under of the game just to make it exciting to watch. And there was this compulsive need to take everything to the next level. Everything I did had to involve stakes. If there wasn't money on the line, I would immediately lose interest and move on to something else. Eventually, I started to notice this gambling problem that I was developing. And the way that I figured this out was my results at the poker table really started to suffer. I wasn't winning consistently as I was in the past, and I caught myself making really dumb mistakes that I normally wouldn't do. It took me a while to figure this out because you have to remember that this was before I discovered my interest in all this self-development stuff. So I never spent any time reflecting on my actions or figuring out ways to better myself. At that time, I just lived day to day caught up in the momentum of life without ever considering the consequences of my actions. Eventually, what happened was I spent so much time gambling and betting on other things that I hardly spent any time improving my poker skills or even just trying to maintain my skills. And my ability as a poker player began to atrophy. It's kind of like that old saying, if you don't use it, you lose it. And this is exactly what was going on. My excessive compulsion to gambling started to overshadow my love and passion that I had for the game of poker. Now, you would think that this would be an easy fix. I should just stop betting on other games and rededicate all my time at getting better at poker again. However, there was this very bizarre thing that happens when you develop an addiction. I don't know how to properly put this into words, but it's almost as if you cross a point of no return. The previous love and enthusiasm I had for the game, it just wasn't the same anymore. Everything just became underwhelming, and I struggled to maintain concentration when I was at the table. And eventually, I kind of found myself becoming more and more distracted by unimportant things. It reached a point to where I would look forward to when the session would end. But in the past, I could play even 8, 9, or 10 hours like every single day. But now, I could barely make it through 3 hours at the table. This was a moment where I finally stopped to think about the game, and I contemplated what my future would look like if I continued down this path. Because poker is a career choice where you need to be 100% all in and dedicated, or not. Like, you can't be halfway. It's not like you have a guaranteed salary or paycheck or benefits that you can fall back on. Because on average, in a year, there would be 2 months where I would lose money like no matter what. So if I'm not mentally sharp and on top of my game during those other 10 months of the year, it got really difficult to pay my bills. This leads us to the most important question that people need to ask themselves. Do I have a gambling problem? Like, in all seriousness, this is what it comes down to. If you're unable to be transparent and honest with yourself, then this can end up being a very dark and depressing road that's full of despair. Fortunately for me, I started to see the writing on the wall and I kind of added everything up. I wasn't making as much money as before, I didn't have the same passion and love for the game, and more importantly, I couldn't envision myself as a professional poker player for much longer. As soon as you begin to doubt your self-image of who you are as a person and what you want to do, then everything will eventually start to unravel. The interesting part about this story is that my ultimate undoing came at the hands of the US government. I think it was about just over 10 years ago now, somewhere in April of 2011. The United States Department of Justice, they kind of shut down the 3 biggest online poker sites. And this came as a complete shock to myself and all the other fellow players, as we weren't expecting this at all. Because at the time, the online poker community was thriving, it was booming, it was very popular, and it was a hobby that people could enjoy from the comfort of their own homes, instead of having to get in their car and drive to the casino in order to play a game of cards. Again, this was something that I completely lucked out on. This ban by the US government, it didn't apply to Canadian players like myself, so I still had access to my account online and all the money that I had built up over the years. But I think this was the final straw that broke the camel's back. There were just way too many signs pointing in the direction of failure, and that this whole gambling thing that I was pursuing, it just wasn't going to work out. So what did I do? Eventually, I made the painful decision to swallow my pride and accept the fact that this was the end of the road, which was an extremely difficult decision to make because I had to admit to my family and friends that I was a failure. And especially with anything associated with gambling, people are going to criticize you, they're going to judge you, they're going to make you feel like you're stupid for wasting time on something that's just so reckless. This part really didn't faze me that much because I've been through so much adversity in my past that I've become pretty good at not letting these low moments get me down. I always have this super optimistic outlook on the world that our personal failures are just teaching moments in disguise. Because you essentially have 2 choices. You can feel sorry for yourself and wallow in self-pity, or you can just move on and figure out what the next move is. What ended up surprising me the most was that even after quitting poker and gambling in general, I noticed I had these very peculiar habits that had developed over time. The most obvious was this incessant need I had to just like shuffle poker chips whenever I was at my computer. I always had this urge to just pick something up and hold it in the palm of my hand. And if I didn't, then I became completely overwhelmed by anxiety. This caused me a tremendous amount of grief, especially at work. When I finally quit poker and got a real office job, I brought a stack of poker chips with me into the office, kind of, just like this. And I would riffle them at my desk when no one was around. But of course, there was always someone around in the office, and I would kind of hear them yell out like, "What the hell is that?" Right? Because they would hear this super annoying noise. Like imagine you're at work and you hear this, it's just so annoying, right? I came to the conclusion that this anxiety is very similar to that of a cigarette smoker. It's like, you know, when you see someone that just quit smoking, but now they're kind of walking around with a lollipop in their mouth or they're always chewing on gum. They're trying to substitute their bad habit of smoking with something less harmful, but at the same time, it satisfies the physical addiction that they're prisoners to. Now, of course, shuffling poker chips doesn't even seem like that bad of a habit to have, but I still think it's important to recognize what triggers the anxiety. Am I an anxious person because I don't have any bets on the sports game tonight? Or am I an anxious person because I don't have a stack of poker chips with me to play with? And more often than not, it was the latter rather than the former. Okay, so how did I finally overcome my addiction to gambling? Now, of course, I am no psychologist, so take all this information with a grain of salt, be completely skeptical. But what really worked for me was to come face to face with my addiction. If it's gambling, smoking, alcohol, or whatever it is, denial is what hamstrings the road to recovery. If you can never own it and admit to it, then you'll never overcome it. Once I faced that truth in my life, the next step was figuring out what to do next and what approach I should take. I think what works for most people is to just remove the temptation from their lifestyle entirely. Because if you can remove the temptation, then you are eliminating the addiction, which is probably what I should have done. But I am such a stubborn person that I just absolutely hate being controlled by anyone or anything, especially not by something as stupid as like a gambling disorder. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to figure out a way to become just like a regular person who can gamble responsibly without having the compulsive desire to go crazy. So what I did was, and this is going to sound really dumb, but I looked at the way that I consumed alcohol. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, I am the definition of a casual drinker. I can go out to a party or a bar, I can have a few drinks, or even get totally obliterated. But after that, I can easily go days, weeks, or even months without ever craving a drink. And this is what I wanted when it came to gambling. I wanted to be able to just play a $5 game of poker for fun with my friends and family, and not have this need to take things further. Because far too often that $5 home game would lead to a $10 side bet with my brother, then a $100 tournament buy-in online, and then another $500 worth of cash games. And for whatever reason, whenever I got in the mood to gamble, things would just escalate way too fast. So I devised a plan for my gambling behavior to mimic my drinking behavior. Again, I know this probably doesn't make any sense, this sounds completely stupid, but I am someone who is unbelievably dedicated and disciplined when I just have my mind set on something. And I just wanted to become a responsible gambler, like at all costs, and just be able to enjoy it casually. But also, I was coming from a place of success. It's not like I was broke or I hit rock bottom or I was on the verge of throwing my life away, like none of those things. I had a decent amount of savings built up from poker that I wanted to make sure was protected from any future gambling compulsions. To put it simply, the goal I had was to control my gambling addiction, not destroy it. Whenever an opportunity came up to place a bet with friends or play some cards with family, I wanted to be able to just join in like a normal person and play too, but to just play for the fun. At first, this was incredibly difficult because I went from playing $100 buy-in games on a daily basis to now playing only, $5 buy-in games like once a month. So not only did I impose a strict monetary limit on myself, but I limited the amount of frequency of days that I could actually gamble and bet money. It's been just over 9 years now since I last played professionally, and since then, not once have I made a wager that was above my means. And whenever an opportunity arises to play with my family, which just came up this past weekend, I can play for fun and have an absolutely great time in the process. And it doesn't have to be this crazy, epic, betting spree. And in the end, it just feels absolutely wonderful to be in control. Hopefully you guys found this story about my past interesting or helpful in some way. Now, I know I am not the most well-read or educated person, nor have I always made the best decisions, but the one constant in my life is that I am more than willing to be self-critical, admit failure, and learn from my mistakes. This part is just so important for anyone out there who wants to live a better life. These moments can be incredibly challenging, but if you can find a way to be objective and honest with yourself at the same time, then hopefully everything should work out for you in the end. Again, if there's anyone watching this who needs help with gambling addiction or knows of someone who does, I urge you to please seek help for that person or for yourself, because there are a ton of resources available out there. Nowadays, all you just need is a simple Google search, and it should match you with someone you can talk to that can also give you assistance. Just remember that there is always one person who is one bet away from ruining the rest of their life. Thanks for watching.